On this episode of AV Week, we talk fiber. Should we be using it more? Is it good for you? AV in cars, what it means to our industry and how their problem solving can help ours. And AVWeek's article on education, experiential, or is it really more about data acquisition? This and more on AV Week.
The network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AVNation.
This is AVNation.
This is AV Week, episode 367. Know Your Numbers. Recorded September 7th, 2018.
Support for AVNation is brought to you by Christie Digital and by Buy-In.
Hey, everybody, and welcome to AV Week, your source for news and information in the AV integration industry. I'm your host today, George Tucker. Tim has so graciously offered me the seat today as he is in CEDIA out there on the left coast covering the CEDIA Expo. We'll hear lots about that in the forthcoming days on our webpage. So check that out. There'll be lots of interviews, lots of product stuff. That they're doing some really interesting things this year. All right, so to that end, as you know, the show is about the news and information, and we bring on our smart and talented guests to talk about the news and the technology and sort of give insight into what's going on. To help me do that today, I have two fine gentlemen, and I use that word loosely. They are Mike Tomei. He is the principal at Tomei AV Consulting. How are you, sir?
Great, George. Thanks.
All right. Also a regular on EdTech here on AVNation as well at times.
Yep.
And also joining us today is an old friend, Leonard Suskin. He is Senior System Designer at Spectra Audio Video Design Group. How are you, sir?
I am delighted to be here, George.
Thank you. We're delighted to see you. We are always delighted to see you, Leonard. Always. All right, well, let's get on with the stories here so we can get through this show. First story is from Commercial Integrator, the video over fiber revolution. No, this is not our friend Kellogg trying to convince you to keep your idle hands idle. This is about putting in our light-based fiber systems over, say, networking. It's something that has always been on the fringe of what we do, especially in the resi world, but even in commercial, you don't see it as often. I know I come from the pro AV staging and live event stuff, and fiber's only just making it into that because, of course, what do? We go with what we know. We know what we can rely on to work every time and not give us headaches. But fiber seems to be, and in this article, the advocacy is for the idea that it will give us those high bandwidth HD, beyond HD, and 4K resolutions. Leonard, I'm going to start with you. So first of all, is fiber part of the infrastructure that you have to deal with in consulting and designing these AV systems now?
I will say that it is always almost there. And I'll say that, believe it or not, I am seeing less call for it today than I did even a few years ago.
So why do you think that is?
Well, one thing is that fiber goes far.
Yeah.
So we would sometimes in a large building, large campus, you want to get any video anywhere. You run fiber from the basement all the way up. You run it all the way down. You have your backbone. These days, that's all Ethernet. You're all going to your nearest switch, to your next switch hop. You have connectivity throughout a space, and unless being completely uncompressed, unless the amount of bandwidth is really a requirement, it's easier to send H.264 or similar over the network end to end. You have at least a gig everywhere, with the standard converged network architecture that, is there already outside of us. The one exception that we, believe it or not, just today we're talking about here is USB 3.0. USB 3 over copper does exist. It's expensive. If you have like $1,000 USB 3 camera, you're going to need a $1,200 copper extender to extend that signal. And the active fiber ribbon cables are probably a cheaper and better option, and that's the one spot that I'm seeing more of it. Straight up video, we're seeing HD-based-T, and we are seeing some form of compression, be it H.264, JPEG 2000, or whatnot.
And now, Mike, let me. Leonard has discussed that maybe we don't need that high quality of video, at least right now in some of these installations. They're not asking for it, nor is it being really necessary. But you work a lot with education, and that experiential education thing that we'll get to an article in a little bit in this show about. That seems to me that would require some of that higher definition and the ability to transport, say, live streaming stuff.
I think that I don't typically. So yeah, I do a lot of work in the education field. That's my main field. I don't do a lot of work in the broadcast world or production houses, that sort of thing. So I don't really feel that in the education world there is that need for that uncompressed video. Like Leonard was saying, we can get away with some compression over using the AV over IP type designs these days, especially in education, and get what we need. I don't really specify a lot of fiber myself either. Like I said, I don't work in broadcast or kind of high-end video production, where it's you need that uncompressed video to make its way over a cable. And most of the boxes and devices that I use or specify for education or corporate projects rely on copper connections. And I'm trying to reduce the amount of boxes I'm putting into designs. I don't want to put a bunch of fiber converters all over the design, and then we have increased our boxes by double and increased our chance of something dying by double in that system. So well,
let me ask you that, though, because then you're saying, are you going native category cable with boxes that just input? There are no adapter boxes in your systems for category 5, category 6, category 7 cable?
No, I mean, I guess it depends on the system. So there are definitely, I'm using, copper twisted pair extenders when I need them, HDMI extenders, things like that. So you have a transmitter and a receiver on each end. So that, you have your boxes there. But so many of these.
The HD-based-T ecosystem is also very, very mature in terms of copper products. You have your scaling receivers, your scaling transmitters, your auto switching transmitters, your transmitters that carry audio, your transmitters that carry USB or IR extension. And with the network stuff, and also with the fiber stuff, you don't see as much. You don't see the all-in-one with an amplifier built into it also. And also, I think to Mike's point, we in the AV world can fall in love with uncompressed video. And when I was working for a pure consulting house, we always said, we don't want compression. We don't want chroma subsampling.
But there's too much green in all that video, so you need chroma subsampling. I'm just kidding.
And my first question to a client is, what are you doing here? What are you looking at? And it's not, oh, we're looking at a laptop. No, not even that. What is the content what's the picture? Is it, if it's education, is this education as in there's going to be a PowerPoint slide with 4 bullet points? Is this education as in we're an engineering school and you're going to be looking at a highly detailed technical diagram? We're a medical school and you're going to have to be looking at a CAT scan or PET scan or some other 3-letter abbreviation scan that you're going to need to see fine gradations of color. Except for cases like that, which are still edge cases or niche cases, we see a lot more of, I want to see my pie chart, I want to see my PowerPoint, I maybe want to see my spreadsheet. If you're compressing that, JPEG 2000, if you're compressing that even H264, 265, nobody's going to notice.
And especially
So-
when they're using Zoom or Skype for conferencing. I mean,
Right.
you can have great uncompressed video right up until you hit Zoom, and then that's the end of that. I mean, so it's so do you really need it?
But we
So let me-
always think that way. We're purists.
Well, let me ask you one question, though. On the purist side, fiber still has this impression, or at least this, I can't think of the right word, but people believe that it's more difficult to deal with. And it's not necessarily true. I know that sounds like marketing hype, but it's not, because the modern fiber is a little bit more malleable. You can get better bend ratios with it. You can terminate it without having to have two guys in oxygen suits in a clean room.
Right.
Right?
True.
But there's still that. Is there a knowledge gap? I mean, I think even Avix's training doesn't mention fiber nearly as much as everything else.
There's,
I could be wrong.
to be quite honest with you, there's a knowledge gap with copper.
Well,
Right.
yes.
Exactly.
Because, and this is a side note, is that we in the AV industry, I hate the word wrong, but let's just say that we terminate copper in a non-standard, weird way. Nobody else crimps a male plug onto a category cable.
Right.
Everybody else punches it down and uses a pre-terminated jumper for the last bit. And we can't even do that right, or at least not like normal people. And yeah, with fiber, like with anything, we, as an industry, I think you have a very good point there that we get scared of it, because I can have somebody sitting next to me who has terminated 8,000 category cables and done it wrong and done it strangely, but still done it, and it worked at the end of the day, and has maybe terminated like 4 copper cables.
Right.
I mean, 4 fiber cables. So yes,
Yeah.
we need to learn. We need to train people on it. We need to certify on it. I've never taken the CTSI. I don't know what's on the CTSI these days. CTSI maybe should include terminating fiber.
I agree that it's not nearly as ubiquitous as, say, copper and how to do all that stuff. It's just an interesting side point. But let's move on to the next story, because it's actually related, but very interesting take. Now, in the past, we've always said that the transition or the technology flow often was subverted about, 10 years ago with the introduction of the iPhone and the iPad and the iTunes and all that, from home to the business, because they wanted the same kind of feel and flow that they had at their home. And now E-Times in an article saying, quote, AV in 2025, network cost outstrips AI computing. Now, let's make a note here. AV actually in this article is for autonomous vehicles. But the article goes on to talk about how two major things in here, really. One, that networking, as in an Ethernet network, is probably the best delivery system for everything going on. But that also includes something called a very strange technology called HD-based-T. Yeah. If you haven't been paying attention, one of the reasons Samsung bought, of course, Harman and AMX is they wanted those technologies that Harman had. But as well, HD-based-T has made a huge push in the last couple of years into automotive. And my question on this, and I'll start with you, Mike. Do we have people coming in these very fancy cars saying, has that shift gone from the home to, it works like this in my car, and that's the thing that I want it to work like here?
I hear that a lot with people saying, in boardrooms or classrooms saying, well, my Apple TV works like this at home. Why can't I just throw it in here? So I get the home thing, but not as much as the car thing. But I think it's a huge market now. When I read the story, I started thinking about, my mind immediately went to GUI design because of touch panels in cars. And, people in the past were dealing with touch panels in conference rooms or classrooms. Now everybody has a touch panel in their car. And so I could see, people really understanding good and bad GUI design because of what they use in their car. So coming into our installs, and they would immediately notice a bad, bad GUI design in a classroom or a conference room, something like that. So I could see that happening big time. And, when I read this article, I actually thought of a story that I have from 2015 at the Infocom show.
Mhm.
We went to a Harman consultant party, and some JBL bigwig got up on stage, and he actually said to all of these consultants out here, we don't make much money off of the pro AV. We make most of our money off of automotive AV or automotive audio. And I thought that was kind of odd to say to a bunch of consultants standing there, hoping that they spec JBL stuff. But that was really surprising to me that he said it. And then all the purchases in the following years that Harman made and Samsung and that sort of thing. It was really telling how much money they make off this market.
Yeah. Well, I mean, to that, Leonard, it's beyond, say, the GUI and the way that things flow in a car for someone, and they will sort of want that influence happening. Maybe not so much now, but you can see it starting. You get those, like when we were in Amsterdam for, Integrated Systems Europe, those taxi cabs, if you've seen them, they've got those giant screens and everything's automated. But those cars are very simply complicated, I like to say, right? The network and what it's doing is fairly straightforward, but there's a lot going on. A lot has to be delivered very quickly. And I think it's a microcosm, at least I have this thought, that it's a microcosm of what we need to start getting at, as in all these complex systems, all this IoT stuff that we're starting to incorporate needs to have a management and flow system that works almost as efficiently as a car that will be able to deliver me my video for the kids in the back seat and also deploy the airbags or put the brakes on when it needs to. So I'm gonna look to you because I know you and I have had long conversations about these kind of things in the past. Can we learn something from the automotive debate about Ethernet versus other proprietary systems delivering this network?
The audio.
Yeah.
It's very interesting because this discussion about Ethernet in cars and the discussion we just finished having about fiber are in some ways mirrors of the same discussion, in that we're not discussing necessarily the payload entirely. We're not discussing all of the sexy stuff. We're discussing the infrastructure, and we're discussing the stuff that the stuff rides on. And we've talked about, Ethernet, HD-based-T. In this article, they did not talk about the other thing that's come up with cars, which is AVB, or audio video bridging.
Right.
Which
actually, Bill, but to that end, if you had read through some of the links, AVB and TSN are mentioned extensively in other articles referencing this. Yeah. Right.
And as is HD-based-T auto, which I'll have to admit was actually news to me, that HD-based-T is moving into the automotive realm. And there is something to learn there. And it's interesting to see this whole subset of the networking world, just as we have ours congealing around audiovisual, there's a whole parallel thing congealing around AV, autonomous vehicle. And in a car, just like an AV, there are some things that have to be timed very precisely. There are some things that best effort is probably fine. If it's a sensor in your engine, all of those sensors, this is like lip sync on steroids. It has to be precisely locked together. If, as you said, it's streaming the movie to the back seat for your kids to watch, maybe that's more of a best effort thing. I find it very interesting to see how different parts of the industry and different industries are handling the same questions, which are, how do we get the bandwidth we need? How do we get it low cost? And automotive also has another factor that we don't, which is space and weight. This is one luxury we have that they don't, in that if we need a giant managed network switch with some more processing power into it, and you need a giant fan to cool it, housing that giant fan, running the giant fan, carrying it around, etc., isn't as big an issue. That leads also to the advantage of Ethernet for us, which is centralization. You can put all of your AV stuff in a data closet. That's already cool. But I'm wandering off topic now.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Well, I know, but what you did say something is you said something about that. You said really what we're talking about is infrastructure. And I know a lot of the themes of some of these shows is infrastructure, right? It's the network, baby. Who owns the platform? But that actually leads us to one of our final stories of the show from Installation International, AVIXA, tracking the AV challenge in higher education. Now, interestingly, this article talks not so much about how to make educational teaching experiential, but how to acquire the data to make it work better. All right. I think that's sort of the subtext theme of this article. Maybe it wasn't so subtle, but I was reading it late at night. Right. So they talk a lot about IoT and data collection and interaction, acquisition and interpretation. Mike, what they talk a lot about is understanding, and they give an example of, well, the data may tell you that there was a number of connections to the VGA, and you think, oh, all these educators are old school and they're still using VGA and it's their beloved device. And they come to find out that, well, something else happened. They all got new Airbooks or Mac whatevers, and it didn't have a connection in the wire bundle for that, so they just reverted to what they know. I ask you about that. Is data acquisition on the AV system, whether that be digital signage or what else, is that actually becoming one of the essentials of our installation and working function of the system, or are they really sort of blowing it out of proportion?
No, well, it's super important. I mean, from my standpoint, as a design consultant, I want to be able to acquire all that data during my designs, and I actually take it back a step. Everybody loves to say, okay, can we jump into our Fusion server and see how many hours we've used these rooms and that sort of thing, but I actually jump back. I work with a lot of schools, and I try to look at the root and talk to faculty and staff and really say, okay, what is it that you need in the beginning of the project? And I do a lot of online surveys with faculty and staff at institutions so that we can hear everybody's voice and find out what they really need in these classrooms, rather than just jumping in head first, making a bunch of assumptions and designing classroom systems that nobody's really going to be using. So, which I think happens all the time. High-level administrators at schools think that they want to throw a real flashy active learning classroom in so that they can bring by all the prospective students during tours, bring it by, and they'll take a look. But if faculty don't want it or don't need it, no one's going to be using the room properly, no one's going to be teaching in there, and it's going to be a big waste of money. So I really try to spend a lot of time on the needs analysis. So yeah, that data is really important to me, but I really take it back to like the root of it, and really pull faculty and staff in the beginning.
That's a great point. And the story about the VGA use because nobody had a DisplayPort to HDMI adapter, it reminds me of the story that keeps getting passed around about the conference room that gets more heavily used for midday meetings because that's the one with a side table where people could set up lunch. Or they overutilize the one with a window because people like the view. And that point and this point can kind of say sometimes that data is not always knowledge. And the numbers are great, but Mike makes a beautiful point that the numbers do not replace talking to people, interviewing people. That initial discussion, what are you doing here? How do you teach? Pedagogy is not our area of expertise, but we enable pedagogy.
Pedagogy,
I probably pronounced it right at least once. And we always get to talk to the facility director. We always get to talk to the IT director. They're important. We always talk to the people paying for it. We always talk to the people maintaining it. We need to talk to the dean, and we need to talk to the teachers. And this 360-degree active learning, students can participate, students can collaborate. That's really neat. We need to make sure that that's how our particular clients are teaching.
So on a real quick question, because we're running out of time on the show, but I'll go to each of you real quick. Leonard, how dangerous is it to talk with the client about the data acquisition that is inherent to those systems? Not just you're going around doing it verbally, but the actual device is recording this information. Is there a concern? Is it great or not?
There's always a concern, but I think it's become such a ubiquitous thing. Your cell phone tracks where you are. And if you have an Android phone, we just learned that even if you turn location services off, it tells Google every half hour or so, oh, hey, Leonard is on Fifth Avenue and 42nd Street. Hey, Leonard is at Fifth Avenue and 50th Street. He just walked 10 blocks. So I hate to say this, but I think that we've come accustomed to being tracked like that. And in my world, in the corporate world, it's not that scary a discussion. Is your conference room being used the same way it would be for a residence? We're going to see how long you were watching television and when you were listening to music on your wireless speaker system. I think that feels less personal. And I've not gotten that pushback yet. The pushback I tend to get is, we don't know what to do with this. We don't want to pay for it. And that's fading.
Pay for it. Mike, to your end, let's give you the final word on this. In that education world, I know you do more than that, but you center on a lot of it. Is that a concern? Are they up in arms about it? Do we have the sort of legal professor and the philosophy professor saying this is wrong, or do they just not know about it and it's the administration keeping track?
No, I don't think it's a major concern. I mean, it's the stats that we're gathering are pretty tame compared to what could be out there. And I think the people that are really hungry for it in the education world are the bean counters. It's the director of finance. When we go and pitch a $180,000 active learning classroom, and they say, well, what kind of numbers, what kind of stats do you have that people are actually using this or want this? Or when we say to them, well, you used to install $7,000 classroom systems, but now we need to do $20,000 classroom systems because we need to put this new technology in. Those are the people that really want to see those numbers. And not, faculty probably don't care. They know what they want and they want to see it in there, but it's the finance people.
Man.
So, yeah.
So know your numbers, but know what they mean.
Yeah.
Right. Well, listen, that's all the time we have. We probably run over time, but it's my first show in a long time. So I want to thank our guests for joining me today on AV Week. First off, Mike Tomei, Mike Tomei, tell people where they can find out more about you and the work you do.
Sure. They can find out more about me on my website. It's tomeiav.com. That's TOMEIAV.com. And people can always find me on LinkedIn. I love to talk shop with everybody.
That's cool. And of course, Leonard, where can they find out more about you, what you do, and the work you're involved in?
Well, I hang my hat these days at Spectra, as I said. That is spectra-ny.com on the interwebs. And you can always find me lurking about Twitter as @Kajurat, if you can spell that right in your first try. God bless you. Otherwise, just look for Leonard Susskind. I am probably the only Leonard Susskind out there.
All right, cool. Well, and again, I want to thank you for watching and for interacting with us. Whether you're at Cedia right now or you watch the shows and talk to us at the various trades, we really appreciate your support. You can find more shows like this on all the verticals in the AV industry, from live production to marketing to residential and commercial, all at avnation.tv. That's avnation.tv. Thank you for watching. We hope to speak to you again very soon.